Sam got the phone call on a Tuesday morning. His mother's voice was soft and broken. She told him that his grandfather, Edward, had died in his sleep the night before. Sam sat on the edge of his bed and stared at the wall for a long time. He did not cry right away. He just felt empty, like someone had taken something important out of his chest and left a hole there. His grandfather was 87 years old. He had lived alone in a big old house at the end of Maple Street for as long as Sam could remember. The house was strange and beautiful. It had dark wooden walls, tall windows, and a garden full of wildflowers that nobody ever took care of. Edward liked it that way. He always said that the best things in life grow without rules. Sam drove 4 hours to reach the town where his grandfather had lived. It was a small, quiet town called Millbrook, the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, and secrets did not stay secret for long. But Edward had always been different. He kept to himself. He smiled at people and helped them when they needed it, but he never let anyone get too close. Even Sam, who loved him more than almost anyone in the world, felt like there was a part of his grandfather that he could never reach. The funeral was small. A few neighbors came. The old woman from the bakery brought flowers. The priest said kind words, but Sam could tell he did not know Edward very well. Nobody really did. After the funeral, Sam's mother gave him the key to the house and told him to go through Edward's things. She said she could not do it herself. It was too hard for her. Sam walked to the house that evening. The sun was going down, and the sky was orange and purple. The house looked like it was sleeping. He opened the front door and stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Old wood, dust, and something sweet, like dried flowers. Everything was exactly the way he remembered it. The big armchair by the window. The tall bookshelf that covered the entire wall. The small table with a chess set on it. Edward used to play chess with himself when he had no one to play with. Sam walked through the room slowly. He touched the things his grandfather had touched every day. A cup in the kitchen, a coat hanging on a hook by the door, a pair of reading glasses on the bedside table. Each thing felt heavy with memory. He sat in the armchair and closed his eyes. He could almost hear his grandfather's voice, telling him stories about faraway places and brave people. The next morning, Sam started going through the house properly. He opened drawers and looked inside closets. Most of it was ordinary. Clothes, old bills, newspapers from years ago. But then he went to the bookshelf. Edward had loved books. There were hundreds of them. Old ones, new ones, thick ones, thin ones. Sam ran his fingers along the spines and pulled a few out. Some of them had notes written in the margins, in Edward's neat handwriting. One book caught his eye. It was small and brown, and had no title on the cover. It was pushed far back on the top shelf, almost hidden behind the other books. Sam reached up and pulled it down. It was heavier than it looked. He opened it and found that it was not really a book at all. The pages inside had been cut out to make a hollow space, and inside that space was a key. The key was old and made of dark metal. It had a strange shape. The top of it was carved into what looked like a bird with its wings open. Sam turned it over in his hands. He had never seen anything like it. There was no note, no label, nothing to tell him what it opened. He put it in his pocket and kept searching. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Sam opened it and found an old man standing on the porch. He was tall and thin, with white hair and sharp blue eyes. He said he had been Edward's neighbor for over 30 years. George said he was sorry about Edward. He said Edward was a good man, the best he had ever known. Sam invited him in, and they sat in the kitchen and drank tea. George talked about how Edward used to help him fix his fence every spring, and how they would sit on the porch in the summer and watch the stars. Then George said something that surprised Sam. He said that Edward had been a very private man, and that he had carried something with him his whole life. George did not know what it was exactly. He said Edward never talked about his past, about where he came from, or about his life before he moved to Millbrook. George said he once asked Edward about it, and Edward just smiled and said that some doors are better left closed. Sam thought about the key in his pocket. He wanted to ask George about it, but something stopped him. A feeling in his stomach that told him to wait. After George left, Sam went back to the bookshelf. He looked at every book carefully. He shook them, opened them, checked behind them. On the second shelf from the bottom, he found something else. A small envelope was taped to the back of the shelf, hidden where no one would see it unless they moved all the books. Sam pulled it off carefully. It was yellow with age. On the front, in Edward's handwriting, it said, "For the one who finds the key." Sam's hands were shaking as he opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. It was a letter, written in Edward's neat handwriting. It said, "If you are reading this, then you have found what I hid. I am sorry for keeping secrets. I did it to protect the people I loved. But now that I am gone, the truth should not die with me. The key opens a door that I closed many years ago. Behind that door is everything I was and everything I left behind. To find the door, you must first go to the place where I found my peace. You will know it when you see it. Trust yourself, and be careful. Not everyone who smiles at you is your friend." Sam read the letter 3 times. His heart was beating fast. He did not understand everything, but he understood enough. His grandfather had a secret, a big one, and he had left this trail for someone to follow. Sam looked at the key again. The bird on top seemed to stare back at him, as if it was waiting for him to make a decision. He put the letter in his pocket, next to the key, and stood up. Through the window he could see the town of Millbrook stretching out under the evening sky. Somewhere out there was a door, and Sam was going to find it. He did not sleep much that night. He lay in his grandfather's bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about the letter. What kind of secret could an old man carry for so many years? And what did Edward mean when he said to be careful? The questions turned in his mind like wheels, and by the time the first light of morning came through the window, Sam had made up his mind. He was not going to walk away from this. He was going to follow the trail, wherever it led. He owed it to his grandfather. He owed it to himself. And somewhere deep inside, in a place he could not quite name, he felt like he had been waiting for this his whole life. The next morning, Sam sat at the kitchen table with the letter spread out in front of him and a cup of coffee in his hand. He read the line again. "You must first go to the place where I found my peace." He thought about it carefully. Where did his grandfather find peace? Edward had lived in Millbrook for over 40 years. He liked the garden, he liked the house, but the word peace felt like something deeper than just a place where someone felt comfortable. Sam decided to walk through the town and see if anything came to him. Millbrook was small enough to walk from one end to the other in less than an hour. He passed the bakery, the post office, and the small park where children played on swings. Everything looked normal and quiet. Nothing called out to him. Then he reached the old church at the edge of town. It was a simple building made of stone, with a tall pointed roof and stained glass windows. Sam had walked past this church many times as a child when he visited his grandfather, but he had never gone inside. Edward was not a religious man, or at least Sam had never thought he was. But something about the place made Sam stop. There was a feeling in his chest, a pull like a string was tied to his ribs, and someone was gently tugging it. He went inside. The church was cool and quiet. Sunlight came through the colored windows and made patterns on the stone floor. There were rows of wooden benches and a simple altar at the front. The place smelled like old wood and candle wax. Sam walked slowly down the middle of the church, looking around. On the walls, there were small plaques with names of people who had given money to the church over the years. Sam looked at each one. Near the back, on the left wall, he found one that made his breath stop. It said, In memory of Anna, she gave me peace. Sam had never heard his grandfather mention anyone named Anna, and the letter E had to be Edward. Sam touched the plaque with his fingers. It was cold and smooth. Who was Anna? Was she someone Edward had loved? Someone he had lost? Behind him, a voice said, "You must be Edward's grandson." Sam turned around. A woman was standing near the door. She was maybe 60 years old, with short gray hair and kind brown eyes. She wore a simple blue dress and held a bunch of flowers in her hand. She was smiling, but there was sadness in her eyes. She said her name was Lena. She had known Edward for many years. She used to bring flowers to the church every week, and sometimes she would find Edward sitting alone in one of the benches, just staring at the plaque. She said he never explained it, and she never asked, but she could see that it meant something very deep to him. Sam told Lena about the letter and the key. Maybe it was the way she talked about his grandfather, with so much respect and warmth. Or maybe it was because he needed someone to help him, and she was the only one who seemed to know anything. Lena listened carefully. When Sam finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I think I know something that might help you. Come with me." They walked together through the town to Lena's small house. It was a neat little place with a garden full of roses. Inside, she went to a cupboard and pulled out a box. She said Edward had given it to her 5 years ago. He asked her to keep it safe and to give it to anyone who came asking about him after he was gone. She had almost forgotten about it until now. Sam opened the box. Inside was another letter and an old photograph. The photograph showed a young man and a young woman standing in front of a large building. The man was clearly Edward, but young. He was smiling wide, something Sam had rarely seen. The woman next to him was beautiful, with dark hair and bright eyes. On the back of the photograph, someone had written, "Edward and Anna, 1961. Sam looked at the letter. It was written in Edward's handwriting, just like the first one. It said, "If you have come this far, then you are braver than I was. Anna was the love of my life. We met when we were young, in a city far from here. We had a life together, a good one, until everything changed. I cannot tell you the full story in a letter. You must find it yourself. Go to the cabin in the woods north of Millbrook. Follow the river until you reach the old stone bridge. Cross it and walk for 10 minutes. You will see it. Inside, you will find what you need to continue." Lena watched Sam read the letter. She asked him what it said, and he told her. She nodded slowly and said she knew the cabin. She had seen it once, years ago, when she went walking in the woods. She thought it was abandoned. She offered to take Sam there the next morning. That night, Sam stayed in his grandfather's house. He looked at the photograph for a long time. Young Edward looked like a completely different person, happy, full of life, standing next to this woman named Anna, who had meant everything to him. What had happened to her? Why had Edward never talked about her? And why had he hidden all of this so carefully? Sam also thought about the last line of the first letter. Not everyone who smiles at you is your friend. It was a warning. But a warning about what? About whom? Sam looked out the window at the dark street. The town was quiet. Nothing moved. But the words stuck in his mind like a thorn. The next morning was gray and cool. Lena met Sam at the edge of town, near the start of the path that led into the woods. She wore walking boots and carried a small bag with water and food. She smiled at Sam and told him not to worry. She said the woods were safe, just a little wild. They walked along the river for about 40 minutes. The water was clear and moved fast over the rocks. The trees were tall and thick, and the path was covered with fallen leaves. Birds sang above them, and the air smelled fresh and green. It was a beautiful place, and Sam understood why someone might come here to find peace. They reached the old stone bridge. It was small, just wide enough for two people to walk side by side. The stones were covered with moss. They crossed it, and walked for another 10 minutes through the trees. Then Lena pointed ahead and said, "There it is." The cabin was small and made of wood. It was old, but still standing. The roof had some holes, and the windows were dark. Vines had grown up the walls and around the door. It looked like no one had been there for years. Sam pushed the door open. It moved slowly, and the sound it made was loud in the quiet of the forest. Inside, the cabin was one room. There was a table, a chair, a small bed, and a fireplace. Everything was covered in dust. On the table, there was a metal box with a lock on it. Sam pulled the key from his pocket, the one with the bird on top. He put it into the lock and turned it. It fit perfectly. The lock clicked open. Inside the box, there was a folded map, a bundle of old letters tied with a string, and a small leather notebook. Sam picked up the map first. It was hand-drawn, showing the area around Millbrook, but with markings and arrows that pointed to a place Sam did not recognize. There was a circle drawn around a spot in the hills to the east, and next to it, Edward had written one word: home. Lena looked at the map over Sam's shoulder. She said she did not know what place the map was showing. It did not look like anywhere she had been. The first page had just one sentence. "The truth is not always what you want it to be, but it is always what you need." Sam felt a chill run down his back, not from the cold, but from the feeling that he was stepping into something much bigger than he had imagined. His grandfather had built a trail of secrets, each one leading deeper into a past that he had spent his whole life hiding. And Sam was now walking that trail, step by step, into the unknown. He put everything back into the box and closed it. He looked at Lena and said, "I need to find this place on the map." She nodded and said, "Then we will find it together." They stepped out of the cabin and back into the woods. The trees seemed taller now, the shadows darker, and somewhere behind them, though neither of them noticed, a branch snapped under someone's foot. Sam and Lena walked back through the forest without saying much. Sam held the metal box tightly under his arm. His mind was full of questions, and every time he tried to answer one, two more appeared. Who was Anna? Where was the place marked home on the map? And what truth was his grandfather talking about in the notebook? When they reached the edge of town, Lena invited Sam to her house for lunch. He accepted. They sat at her kitchen table and spread out the contents of the box: the map, the letters, and the notebook. Sam untied the string around the bundle of letters and opened the first one. It was written in a woman's handwriting, soft and curving. It began with, "My dearest Edward," and ended with, "Forever yours, Anna." The letter was from 1962. Anna wrote about missing Edward. She talked about the garden they used to have, and the sound of the river near their home. She said she hoped he would come back soon. The letter was full of love, the kind of love that is quiet and deep, not loud and showy. Sam felt his throat tighten as he read it. He opened the next letter, and the next. They were all from Anna, written over many years. The tone changed slowly. The early letters were happy and hopeful. Then they became worried. Anna wrote about trouble, about people who were watching them, about danger. She said they needed to leave. In one letter, she wrote, "They know about us, Edward. We cannot stay here. Please, let us go before it's too late." Sam looked at Lena. She had been reading the letters too, leaning over his shoulder. Her face was serious. She said it sounded like Edward and Anna were running from something or someone. Sam agreed. But from what? He opened the notebook again and started reading. Edward had written it like a diary, but not with dates, just entries, one after another. The first entry talked about a town in Eastern Europe where Edward had grown up. He wrote about a factory where his father had worked, and a government that controlled everything. He wrote about meeting Anna at a market when they were both young. She was selling flowers. He bought one, and then came back every day until she agreed to have dinner with him. The entries painted a picture of a world that was hard and cold. Edward wrote about rules that made no sense, about people who disappeared in the night, about fear that sat in your stomach like a stone. He and Anna had married quietly, without telling many people. They lived in a small house near a river and tried to live a normal life. But Edward had done something that put them in danger. The notebook did not say what it was exactly. It only said, "I took what they wanted to keep hidden. I could not let the truth stay buried." Sam stopped reading and looked out the window. His grandfather was not just an old man who liked books and gardening. He was someone who had lived a completely different life in a completely different world. A life full of danger and secrets. Sam felt like he was meeting his grandfather for the first time. Lena said they should look at the map more carefully. She went to a drawer and pulled out a modern map of the area around Millbrook. They placed Edward's hand-drawn map next to it and tried to match the landmarks. The river was the same. The bridge was the same. But Edward's map showed a path going east into the hills, to a place that was not on the modern map. There was a valley marked with the word home and what looked like a drawing of a small house. Lena said she had lived in Millbrook her whole life, and had never heard of any house in those hills. But the hills were thick with forest, and not many people went there. It was possible that something was hidden out there that nobody knew about. Sam spent the rest of the afternoon reading the notebook. Each entry revealed more about Edward's past. He wrote about escaping from his country with Anna in the middle of the night. They crossed borders in the dark, hiding in trucks and trains. They had nothing with them except a small bag and each other. They traveled for weeks before they reached a safe place. Then they moved again and again, always afraid that someone was following them. The last entry in the notebook was different from the rest. It was written in a shaking hand, as if Edward had been old and tired when he wrote it. It said, "I built a life in Millbrook. I found peace, but I never stopped looking over my shoulder. Anna is gone now, and I carry her with me every day. The things I took, the truth I kept, it is all still there, waiting. I hope someone brave enough will come and finish what I started." That evening, Sam went for a walk. He walked through the quiet streets of Millbrook, past the church, past the bakery, and down to the small park. He sat on a bench and watched the sky turn dark. He thought about his grandfather and Anna and the life they had lived before Millbrook. It was like a story from a movie, except it was real. As he sat there, he noticed something. A man was standing on the other side of the park, near the trees. He was tall and wore a dark coat. He seemed to be looking at Sam. When Sam looked directly at him, the man turned and walked away. Sam felt a cold feeling in his stomach. It might have been nothing, just a man out for a walk. But Edward's warning came back to him. Not everyone who smiles at you is your friend. Sam walked quickly back to the house and locked the door. He checked all the windows. He told himself he was being silly, that he was letting the letters and the notebook make him nervous. But the feeling did not go away. The next morning, Sam met Lena at the edge of town again. He told her about the man in the park. She frowned and said she did not recognize anyone like that in Millbrook. She said it might be a visitor, someone passing through. But she also said they should be careful. They followed the map into the hills. The path was narrow and steep, and the forest was thick on both sides. They walked for over an hour, climbing higher and higher. The air got cooler and the trees got taller. Sam checked the map every few minutes, matching the landmarks Edward had drawn with what he saw around him. A fallen tree here, a large rock there. Everything matched. Then the path opened up, and they found themselves standing at the edge of the small valley. It was beautiful. Green grass, wildflowers, and a stream running through the middle. And on the far side of the valley, half hidden by trees, was a small stone house. Sam's heart beat fast. This was it. This was home. They crossed the valley and reached the house. It was old, but well built. The stone walls were thick, and the roof was made of heavy tiles. The door was wooden, and had no lock. Sam pushed it open. Inside, the house was simple but not empty. There was a table, 2 chairs, a bed, and a fireplace. On the walls, there were shelves with books and jars. And in the corner, on a wooden stand, there was a large wooden chest. It was old and dark, with metal corners and a heavy latch. Lena stayed by the door while Sam walked to the chest. He lifted the latch and opened it. Inside there were stacks of papers, hundreds of them. Documents, photographs, handwritten notes. Sam picked up the first stack and looked at them. They were official documents, with stamps and signatures. Some were in a language he did not recognize. Others were in English. They looked important, like government papers. Under the papers, there was a thick folder. Sam opened it and found photographs. Black and white, old and faded. They showed buildings, people, machines, and in some of them, Sam could see things that made his blood run cold. Fences with wire on top, people in lines, guards with guns. It looked like a prison, but worse. Sam looked at Lena. His face was pale. He said, "I think my grandfather took these from somewhere he was not supposed to. I think these are proof of something terrible." Lena came closer and looked at the photographs. Her hand went to her mouth. She said, "Edward was keeping evidence." Sam nodded. That was what the notebook had meant. Edward had taken the truth, the proof of something awful, and he had hidden it so that one day it could come to light. They stood there in the quiet of the stone house, surrounded by the weight of the past. Sam felt proud of his grandfather. Because if someone had been looking for these documents all these years, and if that man in the park was connected to it, then Sam and Lena were now in danger too. Sam started to put the papers back into the chest when Lena grabbed his arm. She pointed to the window. Outside, moving through the trees on the far side of the valley, was a figure in a dark coat, the same man from the park. He was walking toward the house. Sam moved fast. He grabbed the thick folder of photographs and the most important-looking documents from the chest and shoved them into his backpack. His hands were shaking, but his mind was clear. They had to get out of the house. They had to move now. Lena was already at the back of the house, looking for another way out. She found a small window on the far wall, half hidden behind a shelf. It was just big enough for a person to climb through. She pushed it open, and the cool air of the valley rushed in. Sam helped her through first, then passed the backpack to her, and climbed out after her. They crouched behind the house and looked back toward the front. The man in the dark coat was closer now. He was walking with purpose, not fast, not slow, like someone who knew exactly where he was going and was in no hurry. Sam could see his face now. He was maybe 50 years old, with a sharp jaw and gray hair cut very short. His eyes were hidden behind dark glasses. Sam and Lena moved along the tree line, keeping low and quiet. They circled around the edge of the valley and found the path that led back into the forest. Once they were under the cover of the tall trees, they started to move faster. Sam looked back every few seconds, but the man was not following them. At least not yet. They did not stop until they reached the old stone bridge. Lena was breathing hard. She leaned against the bridge and looked at Sam with wide eyes. She said, "Who is that man?" Sam shook his head. He did not know, but he was sure of one thing. That man had not found the valley by accident. He was looking for the same thing Sam had found. They hurried back to town. When they reached Lena's house, they went inside and locked the door. Sam spread the documents out on the kitchen table and started going through them more carefully. The folder was full of photographs and official papers. Some of the papers had names on them, names of people and names of places. Sam could not read all of them because some were in another language, but the ones in English told a terrible story. The documents were about a prison camp. a place where people had been locked up for no good reason. The papers listed the names of prisoners, the dates they arrived, and in many cases, the dates they died. There were reports signed by officials admitting that the conditions were cruel and that people were being hurt. And there were photographs that showed it all. The thin faces, the cold buildings, the guards who stood and watched. Sam felt sick. His grandfather had been inside that place, or at least close enough to take these documents and photographs. He must have risked everything to get them out. And now, decades later, someone still wanted them hidden. Lena made tea, and they sat quietly for a while. Then she said something that surprised Sam. She said that years ago, she had heard a rumor in town. An old story about a man who came to Millbrook from far away, and who had been in some kind of trouble before he arrived. People talked about it in whispers, but no one ever said anything directly. She always thought it was just gossip. Now, she knew it was true. Sam opened the leather notebook again. He had not finished reading it. There were entries he had skipped. He went back to them now. In one entry, Edward wrote about the night he took the documents. He said he worked at the camp as a translator. He was not a prisoner, but he saw everything. He saw the cruelty and the death and the lies the officials told to the outside world. One night, he went into the main office and took copies of the most important papers. He hid them inside his coat and walked out. He was caught trying to leave the country with Anna. They were separated. Edward managed to escape, but Anna was held back. He waited for her for months in a safe place across the border, hoping she would find a way out. She finally did. She came to him thin and tired and with fear still in her eyes. They never talked about what happened to her during those months. They just held each other and promised to keep going. They traveled to America. They changed their names. Edward became Edward Walker, and Anna became Anna Walker. They moved from city to city for years, always afraid, always looking behind them. Finally, they came to Millbrook. It was small and far from everything. It felt safe. They built the stone house in the valley as a place to keep the documents, a place no one would find, and they tried to live a normal life. But Anna was never the same after what happened to her. The fear never left her. She became quiet and thin and spent most of her time in the garden, planting flowers and talking to them as if they were old friends. Edward wrote that watching her suffer was the hardest thing he had ever done. He felt responsible. He had taken the documents to expose the truth, but the price had been too high. Anna died in 1985. The notebook said she died peacefully, in her sleep, in the house on Maple Street. Edward buried her in the church cemetery and put up the plaque that Sam had found. After she died, Edward never went back to the stone house in the valley. He could not bring himself to go there without her. But he kept the map, the key, and the letters. He hid them in the house, hoping that one day someone would find them and finish what he had started. Sam closed the notebook. His eyes were wet. He understood now. His grandfather had spent his whole life carrying this weight, the guilt of what happened to Anna, the danger of the documents, the loneliness of a secret he could never share. It was all too much for one person to carry alone. Lena reached across the table and put her hand on Sam's. She said, "Your grandfather was a brave man." Sam nodded. He was. But the danger was not over. The man in the dark coat was proof of that. Someone out there still did not want these documents to be seen. Sam thought about what to do. He could go to the police, but what would he tell them? He had old papers from another country and a stranger who might or might not be following him. It was not enough. Then he remembered something. In the documents, there was a name that appeared many times. Victor Kessler. It was on several of the official reports, signed with a bold hand. Sam did not know who Victor Kessler was, but the name felt important. He searched through the papers again and found a photograph of a young man in a uniform. On the back, it said, V. Kessler, 1960. Sam stared at the photograph. The young man in the picture had a sharp jaw and cold eyes. Sam looked at the picture for a long time, and then a horrible thought came to him. The man in the dark coat, the sharp jaw, the cold way he moved. Could it be possible? Could the man following them be connected to Victor Kessler? It was late now. The night was dark and quiet outside. Sam gathered all the documents and put them back in his backpack. He told Lena he was going to take them to the house on Maple Street and hide them. He did not want to leave them at her house. If the man in the coat came looking, he did not want Lena to be in danger. Lena argued with him. She said she was not afraid and that he should not go alone. But Sam insisted. He thanked her for everything and walked back to his grandfather's house in the dark. Every shadow on the street made him jump. Every sound made him turn his head. He thought about his grandfather walking these same streets, carrying the same fear, year after year. When he got to the house, he locked the door and hid the documents in the safest place he could think of, behind a loose panel in the back of the closet in the bedroom. He had found it earlier while going through the house. It was the kind of hiding place that only someone who knew the house well would find. He sat on the bed and took a deep breath. Tomorrow he would figure out what to do next. He would find out who the man in the dark coat was. He would find out if Victor Kessler was still alive, and if he was the one behind all of this. And he would find a way to bring his grandfather's truth to light. But for now, he was tired. His body ached, and his mind was full. He lay down on the bed and closed his eyes. The last thing he thought before sleep took him was the image of his young grandfather, standing next to Anna, smiling in the sunlight. Two people who had loved each other and paid a terrible price for doing the right thing. Sam woke up early. The sun was just coming through the curtains, and the house was silent. He lay still for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. Then he got up, washed his face, and made coffee. He had a plan, or at least the beginning of one. He went to the closet and took out the documents. He spread them on the table and separated them into two groups. In the first group, he put the official papers, the reports with names and dates and signatures. In the second group, he put the photographs. Then he took out his phone and took pictures of every single document. Every page, every photograph, every signature. If something happened to the originals, he would still have copies. When he was done, he sent all the pictures to his own email and to his mother's email. He also sent them to Lena, whose email she had given him the day before. 3 copies in 3 different places. Even if someone took the originals, the truth would survive. Then he called Lena. She answered on the first ring. She said she had not slept well either. Sam told her his plan. He was going to take the documents to someone who could do something with them. Not the local police, but a journalist or a historian. Someone who would understand what these papers meant, and who would make sure the story was told. Lena said she knew someone, a woman named Dr. Helen Park, who worked at a university 2 hours away. She was a historian who studied the exact period and region that the documents were from. Lena had read about her in a newspaper article years ago. If anyone could understand the importance of these papers, it was her. Sam agreed. They would go together that afternoon. But first, Sam wanted to do one more thing. He wanted to find out who the man in the dark coat was. He walked to the center of town and went into the small hotel on Main Street. It was the only place in Millbrook where a stranger could stay. The woman at the front desk was friendly. Sam asked her if she had any guests staying there. She said there was one man. He had checked in 3 days ago, the same day as Edward's funeral. He gave his name as Mr. Klein. He was polite, but quiet. He asked about the old houses in town, and about the forest to the north. Sam thanked her and left. Mr. Klein. It was not Victor Kessler, but it could be a false name. Sam thought about going to the hotel and confronting the man, but he decided against it. It was too risky. He did not know what the man wanted or what he was capable of. The smarter thing was to move fast and get the documents to someone who could protect them. He went back to the house and packed everything carefully. The documents, the notebook, the letters, the photographs. He put them all in his backpack and covered them with a jacket. Then he drove to Lena's house and picked her up. They got on the main road heading south toward the university. The drive was quiet. The countryside rolled past, green and wide. Lena talked about Dr. Park and the work she had done. She said the doctor had spent years trying to gather evidence about the prison camps in Eastern Europe, but many of the documents had been destroyed by the people who ran them. What Edward had saved could be one of the most important collections of evidence in existence. Sam gripped the steering wheel tighter. His grandfather had risked his life for these papers. Anna had suffered because of them, and now Sam was carrying them down a highway in a backpack. The weight of it all pressed down on him, but it also lifted him up. He was doing what his grandfather had asked. He was finishing what Edward had started. They reached the university in the early afternoon. It was a large, busy place, with old brick buildings and students walking everywhere. They found the history department and asked for Dr. Helen Park. A young man at the front desk told them she was in her office and that they could go up. Dr. Park was a small woman with glasses and dark hair tied back in a bun. Her office was full of books and papers stacked on every surface. She looked busy but not unfriendly. Sam introduced himself and Lena, and then he told her the whole story. Everything. The key, the letters, the cabin, the stone house in the valley, the documents, and the man in the dark coat. Dr. Park listened without interrupting. Her eyes grew wider as Sam talked, and when he opened the backpack and showed her the documents, she stood up from her chair. She put on a pair of gloves and picked up the papers carefully, one by one. She looked at the signatures, the stamps, the dates. Her hands were steady, but Sam could see that she was deeply moved. She said, "Do you know what you have here?" Sam shook his head. She sat back down and took off her glasses. She said that for decades, historians had been trying to prove the full extent of what happened in those camps. The governments involved had destroyed most of the records. The survivors told their stories, but without official documents, it was hard to make the world listen. What Edward had taken was direct, official proof, signed by the people who gave the orders, stamped with the marks of the government that allowed it. She said it was one of the most significant finds she had seen in her career. She asked Sam if she could study the documents and help bring them to the public. Sam said yes. That was exactly what he wanted. That was exactly what his grandfather would have wanted. Park said she would work with a team of historians and legal experts to verify the documents and prepare them for publication. She said it would take time, but she promised that the story would be told. She also said she would contact authorities about the man who had been following Sam. If someone was trying to suppress these documents, it was a serious matter. Sam and Lena stayed at the university for several hours, going through the papers with Dr. Park and answering her questions. By the time they left, the sun was starting to go down. Sam felt lighter than he had in days. The documents were in safe hands. The truth was no longer hidden. They drove back to Millbrook in the soft evening light. When they arrived, Sam noticed that the hotel on Main Street had its lights off. He went inside and asked the woman at the desk about Mr. Klein. She said he had checked out that morning. He had paid in cash and left without saying a word. The man was gone, but Sam did not know if he would stay gone. That night, Sam went to the church. He stood in front of the plaque that said, "In memory of Anna," and he talked to it. He felt a little foolish, but he did it anyway. He told Anna that he had found the documents. He told her that the world would soon know the truth. He told her that he understood now why Edward had done what he did, and that he was proud to be his grandson. Then he went to the house on Maple Street, and sat in the big armchair by the window. He looked at the photograph of Edward and Anna one more time. Two young people standing in the sunlight, not knowing what the future would bring. They had faced terrible things, and had still found a way to love each other and to do what was right. It was not a perfect ending. They had lost so much, but they had also saved something that mattered. And now, because of them, the truth would live on. Sam stayed in Millbrook for 2 more weeks. He cleaned the house, packed some of Edward's things, and donated the books to the local library. He spent time with Lena, who had become a good friend. She told him stories about Edward that he had never heard, small things, like how Edward always fed the birds in the park, and how he once helped her carry groceries in the rain without being asked. Before he left, Sam visited the stone house in the valley one last time. He walked through the green grass and stood by the stream and listened to the water. The house was empty now. The chest was open and bare, but the place still felt alive, like it was holding its breath, waiting. Sam closed the door of the stone house and walked back through the valley. He crossed the bridge, followed the river, and came back to the edge of town. He stood there for a moment and looked at Millbrook, the small houses, the church, the bakery, the quiet streets. His grandfather had found peace here, and in a way, Sam had found something too. Not peace, exactly, but purpose, a connection to his past, a reason to keep going forward. He got in his car and drove away. In his pocket he still carried the old key with the bird on top. He did not need it anymore, but he could not let it go. It was a reminder that the people we love leave things behind. Not just objects, but stories, truths, and pieces of themselves. And it is up to us to find them, to hold them, and to make sure they are never lost again. 3 months later, Sam received a package from Dr. Park. It was a copy of a published paper with the title, The Hidden Archive, New Evidence from the Eastern European Prison Camps, 1958 to 1965. Edward's name was in the dedication, and next to it, another name, Anna. Finally, after all those years, their story was told.